Hey guys, how's everyone? It's Gurami1 here, and today's topic is something I have been thinking about for quite some time, and that is how well does a Soulsborne PvP player transition to a fighting game? Is there any overlap? This question has actually been in my mind for quite some time because the amount of passion, if you think about it, the amount of passion and dedication that the Soulsborne community has for its PvP is quite phenomenal. Here is a community that tries so very hard to make something that is completely uncompetitive and trying to make it as if it's the next Evo fighter. Let's be real. Let's be real. We have a game, right? These Soulsborne games, and the thing is, it's an RPG. It allows you to level from 1 to 700 with hundreds of weapons and spells and armors to choose from, right? But then not only that, it has co-op, ganks, gang spanks, invasions, duels. How can it try to even be competitive? But the thing is then, right, when you look into the sea of content available on YouTube, when it comes to PvP, the tech, the builds, the strategies, to the tournaments that are held, Asia versus West, grudge matches, $100 pop bonuses, to the rules and meta levels that have to be created. Like in Bloodborne, let's talk about Bloodborne. You have 120 heals, 120 no heals, we have no gems, 70 no gems, we have banning different type of items like bone marrow ash, that type of deal. In all of this is just to make the game slightly more competitive, more duel-like, less broken, just a bit more fun, right? And then you look into the hours and years actually that some people dedicate to this craft, or to this PvP. We have people still playing Demon's Souls to this day. Although the server has been shut down, they managed to create their own. All this passion and dedication rivals that of another huge game that no one thought was meant to be competitive, and that's Smash, right? People thought that Smash was just a little party game for kids, but it's now one of the biggest fighters ever. So surely there must be some form of crossover available. Surely some of the skills that you get from playing Soulsborne PvP has to be adaptable to that of a fighting game. And that's what I really want to look at today. So yeah, the reason I'm actually making this whole video and decided to actually go through with it, although I've always had these thoughts in my mind and stuff, is because just the other day, last month, I picked up a new fighting game. Brand new fighting game from Axis. Now, if you know me, I love my Axis, I love my fighters, and I've done my dues as being part of the FGC since 2006, making Guilty Gear, Axe and Core, not Plus, just Axe and Core tutorials, man. So, anyway, out comes this new game, which I think you guys should know by now what it is, Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, and it looks and plays amazing. It's gorgeous. Beautiful art, character designs, fantastic music, has enough depth that top-level tournament players are all playing it. They have these tournaments right now in Japan that's 10v10, like Guilty Gear old school players versus KOF versus BlazBlue versus Tekken. It's crazy, And the best part of this game is that it's super accessible. It has simple input so that anyone can do the specials. But it also has this new revolutionary single-player mode, which they call it the RPG mode. You can level up your character, make it slightly easier, but in a nutshell, it's like a side-scroller, where you can do your combos on enemies, and you can even play it in co-op as well. It even has these big raid bosses, so you start to use all these inbuilt game mechanics. It's like teaching you, you have to use the dash, the super jump, the crossovering, the spot dodging. It's perfect, absolutely perfect for the beginners. It's basically like a super tutorial mode, or tutorial mode on steroids kind of thing. So this game, Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, I was thinking this game is going to be perfect for people that's going to transition from Soulsborne to a fighting game. So when it comes to Soulsborne PvP, there are two distinctive parts: invasions and duels. And as you should know, invasion technique and strategies doesn't really apply, or should I say, doesn't really transition to fighting games. Like, I don't know about you, but, you know, hiding behind enemies, using invisible potions, heavy armor potions, deliberately being under level but with the most strongest equipment, and extremely fast plug pull tactics just doesn't really sound like it's going to be too useful when playing fighting games. Like, you know, maybe it's good for you to keep your rank, but, you know, let's be real here, you know, fighting games you need to be able to play offline as well. So let's just, for the sake of argument, focus on dueling. And I'll talk a bit about Bloodborne PvP and then also Dark Souls PvP. Specifically Dark Souls 1, since it incorporates nearly everything of the later Dark Souls games, but also the all-important Dark Souls backstab tech. So let's talk about Bloodborne. So in Bloodborne, one of the most common skills that adept PvP players have is the heal parry, or punishing the heal. It's a very important technique and basically boils down to anticipating when your opponent wants to go for the heal. And being successful at heal parries and chasing down opponents actually requires a lot of anticipation and also prediction of where and when your opponent likes to go for heal. Or actually, they might want to mix you up with the beast roar and knock you down instead. So the questions you're doing when you're playing as a good PvP player is you're thinking, do they like to heal after the first hit or the second hit? You know, or do they dash once or twice before they heal? Or do they like to get cover and go around a stairwell before they heal? Which I'm sure quite a few people of you hunters that are with me should know that one quite well. And the thing is this, if one is aware of these options, and if you manage to punish these people, it's actually very similar to that of reading wake-up options on opponents in a fighting game. If they're going for an invincible dragon punch or super. And if you think about it, that's pretty much exactly what the heal in a beast roar is, right? It's a different type of defense option that keeps you longer in the game. The only difference in fighting games is if you manage to predict correctly, you don't have to pray to the lag gods that your punish will land, right? So yeah, if you're good at your heal parries, then that will definitely transition well for you into a fighting game. So another skill a lot of Bloodborne hunters and PvPers have is the iframe dodge. Basically, think of it as dodging at the last possible moment. It's a skill that every Bloodborne and Souls player must learn to have to help compensate against the lag. Because, in case you don't know, all these Soulsborne games, what happens is that there isn't any servers as such. It's all PvP, it's peer-to-peer, so what happens is that you could be matchmaking with someone across the oceans, like from US to China, to Australia, to Brazil, Japan, and God knows where. And the thing is, this causes some attacks, well, a lot of attacks, depending who you're matching with, to have insane phantom range. Like, they have absolutely no chance that they should be hitting you, but it still does, okay? And the reason that is because on your screen you may be 3 dodges and, you know, rolls away, but to them, on their screen at the same time, you could just be right next to them, right? Because you haven't executed your dodges on their screen yet. So what you need to do is dodge at the very last moment, when you actually see on your own screen the attack is coming out. So that's called iframing. So how this translates to, say, a fighting game is in fighting games, there's things called instant blocking, parrying, and spot dodging, rolling. So all these little techniques, all those little things that I talked about just then, is in fighting games and requires you to time it, usually just before the attack comes out. You know, you can use these spot dodging techniques. So definitely, you could use that in fighting games. So this technique you learned in terms of iframes, no problems. Transitions really well. The next skill that translates quite well in Bloodborne and other Souls games is the roll catch. Now, be it roll catching offensively or roll catching defensively, in essence, if you can interrupt and punish their rolls, this is pretty much, well, very similar to anti-airing, basically. So you'll be standing in a good position that you know your attacks can intercept the jump, and you wait for them to come at you, and then bam, you nail them. Like, this is very, very important skill across all fighting games, and especially in like grey and blue fantasy. Counter air attacks can lead to nearly 50% of your opponent's HP once you learn the setups and the combos to deal with it. Okay, now the last skill before we go to Dark Souls 1 is spacing. Now, contrary to popular belief, spacing does indeed exist in Bloodborne and other Soulsborne games, especially if you're finding someone in your own country or has a decent connection to you. Now, don't be fooled by your connections with overseas players. Once you have a good connection, spacing actually really matters. And on top of that, even if you are fighting overseas players, with the right prediction and anticipation, it's actually still very possible that you can whiff punish players. Obviously, if it's lagging too much, it's completely impossible. But there is a balance. There is a sort of a zone that you can actually still do it. You know, you just need to know that that's the time that they like to attack. And to be honest, that's quite similar to fighting games now, especially nowadays. So in Street Fighter V, for example, or for some quicker attacks in other games, if you really want to whiff punish it and you know they love that poke, they love pressing that poke right after this combination, and you know it's going to miss you, you can anticipate that and you can press a button and you can punish them. And it's exactly the same thing. So if you are adept at proper whiff punishing in Bloodborne and Soulsborne games and spacing, you will feel right at home in fighting games as well. So finally, we arrive at Dark Souls 1 PvP. The most broken game, yet the most in-depth PvP experience any Souls game has to offer. Now, the reason for that is the backstab mechanics. In Dark Souls 1, backstabs are instant, they do a ton of damage, and because there's a thing called poise, right, that actually works, backstabs were always an immediate threat. You can also execute them with a roll, so therefore if you're using the wrong weapon and at the wrong distance, people can punish you for being predictable. Now they deal a ton of damage, they force an okozeme, or also known as a wake-up situation, where you can actually chain for another backstab, another mix-up. However, it not only has a lot of ways to executing these backstabs, but actually there are a lot of ways to counter it as well. So this is actually very similar to a fighting game. It's like reading that okozeme mix, reading that high-low throw mix-up, and being that one little step ahead of your opponent. So if you put all these things together, all the things I talked about in Bloodborne and now in this whole backstab situation, okay, so we put it all together, look, when you know, it's all about knowing when to backstab, when to roll backstab, countering backstabs, how to escape chain backstabs, all these techniques things. In essence, guys, the transition is all about really reading the opponent and playing with intentionality, where you sort of know, I know he wants to dash in here, I know he wants to roll here, I can slowly read his attacks and therefore I can dodge in the right time. So these things help you. These things will help you transition to fighting games and transition very well. Now, it's not about the invasion things. You know, it's not about just equipping the best weapon and R1 mashing, not just getting the best gems and going for a dash R1 and, you know, a lucky L2 with the bloodletter and just winning, okay? It's not about donning some stupid shield, okay, that can counter all their magic and you just run up to them and you just backstab them. It's not that, okay? If that's how you play PvP, I'm sorry, it's not going to help you, okay? But if you play Soulsborne PvP with intentionality, where you know that, okay, I know he likes to heal there, I'm gonna switch my weapon into my gun and I'm gonna shoot him here, or I'm gonna chase him down this corridor and then I know he's gonna go for the heal, I'm gonna shoot. Okay, so if you do that, you play with intentionality, the transition to fighting games is actually a very small step. And so, you know, especially with all these new games that's come out, I think Mortal Kombat 11, and I've just shown you Grand Blue Fantasy, it's a lot more accessible, very easy to get into. And so hopefully some of you, my fellow hunters and Ashen Ones, have been a bit too scared, okay, to pick up a fighter. Maybe hopefully after hearing this, all of this, you could give these fighters a chance and hopefully play with more confidence. Anyway, that's it from me today, and hopefully I'll see you in the dream, or Lordran, or somewhere, or maybe Grand Blue. See you guys. Bye bye.
It might have been late, or maybe it was late or too early because I think he moved to where I was doing it.
God, that's fucking amazing.